Hello, and welcome to the Get French Football News Preview Show on today, March 16th, 2017. I'm Eric Devin, and joining me, as always, are Adam White and Nathan Staples. Ligue 1 has an intriguing slate of matches on offer this final match day before the international break, but before we dive into the weekend's action, we'll take a moment to reflect on France's redemption in European competition with Monaco's defeat of Manchester City and Lyon's progression against Roma. Monaco won 3-1 yesterday to go through 6-6 on away goals. Lyon lost 1-2 today to progress 5-4 on aggregate. Congratulations to both of those teams. We'll have the draw for both the Europa League quarterfinals and the Champions League quarterfinals tomorrow. So let's start with Monaco, who were imperious in the first half before again seeming to fade in the second. Nathan, I'll come to you first. Once again, this is a match of two halves. Monaco looked great in the first half, a little bit touchy in the second half. Was this down to a tactical shift on the part of Pep Guardiola, or willingness on the part of the players? What do you pick out as what made this again a match of such stark contrast between the first and second half?
Yeah, I think Pep did the right thing in switching things around in the second half. I think that did make a dramatic difference, bringing De Bruyne slightly further back into the midfield and getting him on the ball more often and influencing things, because they really struggled to keep hold of possession in that first half. I thought Monaco were absolutely sensational. That might be the best performance so far this season, really. They were tenacious, they were risky, they were willing to combat them in the midfield, they were willing to overlap them with the fullbacks, and that caused City no end of problems without tracking wingers. And they were causing havoc, really. And Monaco, in all honesty, maybe should have been out of sight and out of mind and that game over and done with. But a team of City's quality was always going to get back into it in some way. And that shift from Guardiola, combined with this Monaco side that doesn't have as many options as they had earlier in the season. They've also played so many games that it looked a little bit leggy in areas, that the balance of power started to shift back in City's favour. And that goal from Sane really should have given them the boost, I think, to go on and probably see the tie through. But it's great to see that Monaco, with pretty much the only chance they had in that second half, in all honesty, to Timu Bakayoko to nod in as well. It was really great to see them actually battle on and learn from the mistake that they had in the first leg, which was once they conceded, or at least conceded in the second half, combined with the tiredness, combined with the mental toll it took on them, that they capitulated. But credit has to go to the defence as well, because there was a number of really last-minute ditch tackles that denied Aguero, where maybe he should have done a lot better. So they maybe rode their luck a little bit at the same time, but a terrific result for them and a terrific result for French football.
And I don't think that anybody would disagree after the heartbreak we experienced last week with PSG, of course. Adam, let's continue on speaking about Monaco. We're seeing in this match, again, a slight drop-off in performance from first half to second half. Is this down to fatigue? Especially, we've got Gabriel Bachillia and Guido Carrillo no longer available. They had been part of the rotation. Carrillo will be back for the end of the season. Bachillia's season's over. Is fatigue overall an issue? And if so, how do they address that? What competition needs to be prioritized? You still have the League, Champions League, and the Coupe de France.
Well, it's a very interesting question that Jardim's going to have to really, grapple with in the next few weeks. It's interesting, given that we see obviously in England with teams that play a similar style, that very sort of attacking, very pressing, very sort of all action, smash mouth kind of style. They're very sort of intense, the way Monaco play. And we see in the Premier League, that's with Spurs and Liverpool played very similar styles. And Tottenham learnt perhaps a little bit this season, after noticeably tiring in the last season, that they've kind of had to reserve, use that pressing ability in almost spells a little bit. Pochettino's been a much more sort of a bit more tactful in the way that they press and the way that they go about their business, trying to preserve that energy over the course of the season. Liverpool perhaps are still trying to work out how they can do that best. With Monaco, though, I think they're helped out perhaps by playing in France. It's not as intense, obviously, as the Premier League. It's a little bit more defensive. They're going to have opportunities to rest more in games naturally, perhaps without having to do it sort of by design. And perhaps they're not going to be tested as much as Liverpool and Spurs might be in the Premier League by some of the teams lower down. We've seen them go into racing to big leads and have the chance to rest later in games. But nevertheless, you're right. Bachillia and Carrillo are two huge misses, simply because they both started to really prove their worth this season. And along with Jean Moutinho, who is still obviously very much part of Jardim's plans, they'd really come in and shown that they could score goals, and they could, in the league, perhaps games that are less important, lower priority games, they could come in and they could really do a job. Without them, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But going ahead, I think they are helped out by the fact that they're in Ligue and they won't have as intense encounters every week so often. But given they're still in 4 competitions, it has to be something that Jardim's going to have to do, and rotate what is now sort of a shrinking squad because of those things is going to be a factor. In terms of prioritizing competitions, I think perhaps they've got the Coupe de France quarterfinals coming up, where they're playing Lyon, which they would have to rotate. I think for that game, they have to try and, obviously they're going to want to win all 4 of these competitions so they can, but they're going to have to start prioritizing the league and the Champions League, I think. Obviously, the final of the Coupe de Ligue is obviously a very big game. You have to kind of play first choice team there too. So it's going to be a balancing act, not necessarily in starting 11s, but perhaps in resting players and rotating as the game goes on when they get those leads that I think they still will manage to get when they play the bottom half of Ligue. And then, getting Bakayoko, getting Fabinho, getting Falcao off as early as possible and resting those players as much as they can. So it's definitely a balancing act that Jardim's going to have to contend with for the rest of the year. But I think that it's possible, and it's something that they've got things going in their favour, despite that smaller sort of shrinking squad. So for me, the Ligue and the Champions League have to be priorities, but I don't think that means they have to write any other competitions off. I honestly think they can win all 4. Obviously that would be a huge, unprecedented thing for any club to do, but they will fancy their chances in all 4 of those competitions now.
All right, a big potential declaration there from Mr. Adam. If that does come through, I think that may ameliorate your standing in the league predictions table. Turning our attention now to the match that just finished, that was Lyon's trip to Roma. They lost 2-1, as I predicted. Rashid Ghezal was dropped. Maxwell Cornet got the start. He had played very well on Sunday against Toulouse. It was a bit of a surprise, though, to see him after playing 90 minutes. He brought back into the team. Ghezal had done pretty well in the first leg while keeping the ball. I think he had an assist. Nathan, were you surprised to see that change made, given Cornet's, as we saw in the match, less than a clinical approach to striking?
Yeah, especially because at the weekend, switching out the entirety of those 3 attacking players, you thought that common sense would at least predict that Lacazette, Ghezal, and and Valbuena would be the 3 to come into the side. So it was surprising that he didn't start, and I don't think did he come on at all, Eric? I don't think he came on either, did he? So it was a strange one, especially when you think that during the game, Cornet has a fantastic chance to end it, really, in the last.
Sorry, did Ghezal come on in this match or at the weekend?
Yes. In this match, he didn't come on the weekend. I remember that.
No.
Yeah, so
it was Raphael. Raphael was supposed to come on, Fekir and Mamana.
Yeah, so I suppose it's understandable in the sense that bringing him on in this stage where they really needed to defend was maybe a little bit of a strange one, but he is a better option in keeping the ball. You're right, and I think he's probably, especially at this stage, a little bit more clinical than Cornet. I know he got the goal at the weekend, but it's a good solid strike, but at the same time, Lafont should probably do a little bit better. But you make a good point of whether Lyon think they need Ghezal anymore. And when you add in the form that the 3 showed at the weekend, you show how good the 3 performed the previous weekend as well. Is he maybe the most dispensable one, given the fact that Valbuena is probably the best in form? Lacazette's obviously probably going in the summer, but he's the best striking option as the lone frontman. Fekir slowly gaining fitness. Memphis is gaining confidence. Cornet's obviously still very young, so he's someone you want to develop. He looks, if you're picking again, and we mentioned this about Paris Saint-Germain's possible attacking lineups, maybe he's the odd one out now. Maybe he's the one who is maybe slightly dispensable to this team. But again, it's surprising that he didn't play, but at the end of the day, Genesio has been proven right since Lyon got the result they needed, even though it was a little touch and go. It could have been a little bit more comfortable. It could have been a lot worse, but they've got through, which is the big thing, and that's massive for them because you look at this teams that have gone through. There's Manchester United, Celta Vigo, there's Schalke, who have neither of those have had great domestic seasons. At least they all have got talented players in their squads. It's wide open for them, really.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I don't think Lyon necessarily have to fear any of those teams. Perhaps United, perhaps Schalke, but I think certainly the other five, Lyon would be at least, if not favorites, odds even against them. Adam, coming on to you, I wanted to get your take on sort of the role of Ghazal as well. I know it seems weird to hammer on a player who has been sort of peripheral this season, but he was incredibly important to Lyon down the back end of last season. He does offer something somewhat similar to Valbuena in terms of his ability to keep the ball, offer the odd goal, and also be really good at drawing free kicks. But he seems to have had some frisson in terms of his dealings with Genesio. There was an incident he threw his shirt or his shin pads or something after being taken off in the Europa League against AZ. But he has looked really good every time he's been included. Part of this centers around Lyon's inability to tie him down to a contract extension. Where do you see this player going? Is he staying with Lyon for next season? Is an extension still possible? And if not, what are some potential destinations for him?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Given given those run-ins with Genesio in terms of that, in terms of that issue with when he was sort of throwing his shin pads away and the contract extension, it sounds like that, at least from my point of view, perhaps his status at the club is a little bit reliant on whether Genesio stays. Given that Lyon they're below expectations this season. Let's be honest. I know that they're really playing well at the moment. I think they've looked great going forward since Depay's come in. Valbuena's been back in form, but I still think, and I imagine you might agree with this, Eric, I don't know, but Genesio's pretty much since for a long time anyway, his stewardship of the club has been in question, whether he's the right man to really take them forward, whether he's a big enough name or a big enough character for Jean-Michel Aulas and for that sort of Lyon brand that seems to be building with a new stadium and the marquee selling Depay, whether he's the man to really take them forward. So I think, first of all, whether Genesio stays long term, it will probably have a large impact on whether Ghazal stays. First thing I'd like to see him stay. I think he's a good player, and I think he was especially good at the last season, as you mentioned, and really made that role out wide in that team his own. For his career going forward, is it the best thing for him to stay? There's a lot of competition in those places. We saw Cornet playing well today, and at the weekend we saw Valbuena is back in form, and when he's on form, he's 32 now, but when he's on form, he's a very, very good player, and he would probably be picked ahead of him. Depending on Lacazette stays, which obviously is a big if. I think he'll probably go in the summer, but it's still not by no means certain that he goes. And Depay, obviously, they've got a lot of options in that forward area. Fekir as well. Very, very good players. So to further his career, is staying at Lyon the best for him? I honestly don't know that it necessarily is. Perhaps there is a plan to move Depay into the middle next summer or next season. Sorry, if Lacazette goes, and perhaps Ghazal gets more opportunities like that. But I still think that's very much remains to be seen. And whether he can develop even if Lacazette goes, because there's still that competition is a big question. So for him, perhaps he's thinking that that's the reason the contract has been a little bit sort of up in the air, and he's sort of throwing his toys around a bit about the Prem a little bit because maybe he's not getting the game time he wants. Then maybe he's thinking that his future lies elsewhere. In terms of where he would go, it's very difficult to say, because I think perhaps he would want a similar standard of club. He's proven that he's a very good player. He's an up and coming player as well, in not just in France but in European terms, and he'll see himself at a similar level club to Lyon. And I don't know that there's anybody that would give him the opportunity that he wants. So perhaps maybe even a loan move in France, somewhere. And well, he wouldn't go to Saint Etienne, obviously, given Muniz stay at Saint Etienne being very short. We know how fierce the rivalry between those two teams is. But perhaps even somewhere like Marseille. I know they've got some options there as well. Perhaps if you look abroad, perhaps even a club like Valencia of a similar stature, perhaps. I mean, it's very, very difficult to say where he would fit in. But I think from his point of view, he wants to be first choice at a club at a similar stature of Lyon, and he wants it next season. I would, if I was him. He's had that break for a year. He wants to develop his career, wants to develop it as a footballer, which is absolutely just and absolutely right. But whether he'll get it at Lyon is another question. I think Genesio is a factor, Lacazette's a factor, and whether he can find another club that would suit what he wants as a footballer is also another factor. So for him, it's an interesting summer, but an important one in his career. Whether because decisions at this stage of a career could really see him change trajectory in upward or downward fashion. So a big summer ahead, I think, for Gazal and decisions at least for him.
Certainly so. I think he is out of contract this summer, so were he to go anywhere, it would potentially be on a free if Lyon don't re-sign him. So certainly a very momentous summer. I believe Gazal is 25 before the season's end, so sort of a career crossroads for him. In a word from both of you, if Lyon win the Europa League and are back in the Champions League group stages, do we see Tolisso and or Lacazette go this summer? Nathan?
Oh, good question. I think Lacaz's already out of the door, personally, and there's maybe at least a fighting chance with Tolisso then. I still think he's probably on the way to Juve, but there's at least a fighting chance with him. Lacazette, no. Tolisso, maybe.
Adam?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Lacazette is going, but I think Tolisso will stay. I have optimism in there. I would hope that Juve will go back to Blaise Matuidi and perhaps sign him. He might be a better fit, and perhaps I think he's more in need in terms of French midfielders for a sort of revamp of his career. So hopefully, I think Tolisso will stay.
All right, so we're going to turn our attention now briefly. We'll probably talk about this again on Monday, but I wanted to give you two your hot takes on the France squad that was called in today. Just talking about some of the players whose arrivals have made some controversy. You can see the full list on our website, www.getfootballnewsfrance.com. But talking about some of the more controversial players, I guess Florian Thauvin, Dimitri Payet, and Adil Rami being included. I wanted to start with that first. I'll throw this to you, Nathan, first. Does that trio of players, are they all deserving of their position, or would you rather have some of them out? People have intimated that Payet and Thauvin are there perhaps on past reputation / the team they play for, maybe more than anything else. Rami, a bit of a surprise vis-a-vis leaving out Laporte. What are your thoughts on that? And on that trio in particular, I should say.
I think in the point of Rami, yes, I think it's a surprise because he's maybe not played as much for Sevilla this season, and I don't think he's of an international quality anyway. I think that was clear when he was replaced by Titi. So, yeah, that one seems like a strange one to me when you say Laporte has been decent and is a good young centre-back. I don't think you're going to learn anything else from Adil Rami. I don't think he's a starter with the amount of players that are fit, and at least taking a look at someone like Laporte or even a couple of the really interesting young players in France. There's so many great young centre-backs that are really interesting at this moment in time. It might have been at least more worthy to throw one of those in to a sort of reserve role because I don't see Rami starting if that was the potential. The other two, I can understand why Tauvin's gone in. I think he's been good this season. I think he adds a different kind of option to the wings in the sense of him being a little bit more of an attacking ideal in the terms of being a little bit more narrower. He likes to cut inside. He likes to really be the focal point of an attack. I think he'd link up well with Griezmann up front as well. So I don't mind that one. I can understand people maybe being frustrated that other players might be maybe knocking on the door there, but he's still very young, and I think he's had a really good, especially the first few months of the season. I thought he was excellent, so it's worth seeing him in. Payet, I think the inquest starts if you're leaving him out now. He's not had the greatest of starts to his Marseille career. He's had a couple of good games, a couple of really average to poor games, but he's still a really good player and someone that probably at least start the Spain game and can create something. So I can see why those two have been put into the side, although there is arguments for so many players in those attacking positions at the moment. But the Rami one is very confusing.
All right. Adam, I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the players who've been left out. Give you three to talk about. Alexander Lacazette, Timuye Bakayoko, and Mathieu Valbuena.
Yeah, interesting. Lacazette is a huge omission for me. I'm at a loss to see why he's been left out. I think he's perhaps quietly gone about his business in Ligue and has been quietly very, very, very good in Ligue in this season. And I personally think he could be the type of player that France without Benzema, if this is going to continue and they're going to continue leaving out, which I imagine they will, he's the type of player that you want in your team because he could be that centre forward for France. He could be the number 9 if he continues this form and moves on to a big club in the summer, really kicks on in his career. He could be the number 9 they almost build the attack around in years to come. Okay, there's Griezmann there, and there are lots of very, very good players in that forward line. But I'm really surprised that perhaps he hasn't been sort of prioritised in that role, especially when I know Mbappe's been absolutely brilliant. I'm loving seeing him in the squad, but when you compare the two, you kind of think Lacazette, all right, is the natural choice out of the two. They sort of similar-ish kind of players are playing a similar position, and you would have thought, given his form, or despite Mbappe's brilliant form, you still would have thought Lacazette is the more trusted option, the one with more pedigree, and the one that you would trust going forward. Mbappe's still very young. So I was amazed that he wasn't in the squad, to be honest. Bakayoko, I think there's so much competition in that area of the squad. He's almost just a victim of the amount of players they've got in that area. When you think of how good Kante's been this season, playing in a similar position, Pogba's never going to get dropped, being because he's Paul Pogba. I still think perhaps his form also, Bakayoko, has gone a little bit under the radar, and perhaps given that the established players like Matuidi and that team as well, that it's going to be very difficult for him to break in. And whether they need another option there, given the players they've got, is difficult to say. So I can kind of understand that. I personally think that I'm as much as I like Adrien Rabiot, I still think he's a little bit overrated. Out of the two, I would take Bakayoko out of those two, but Rabiot has been a bit of the poster boy for young French players for a good number of years now. So I'm not really surprised, but I might take Bakayoko over him. And Valbuena is an interesting one too, because his form has been absolutely brilliant for Lyon in recent weeks. But again, it may be a case that perhaps France has moved on a little bit from Mathieu Valbuena, despite his really good form. If you look at their forwards, either the 7 that made a squad, and Thuram, Mbappe, Dembele, Gamero, Payet, Griezmann, and Giroud, they've really got a lot of options in there, and perhaps there are better options to Valbuena even in his best form. It's almost like his France career has come to a natural end now, despite his really, really good form. So I'm not really surprised that he wasn't there. In the squad overall, it's quite impressive how good France's squad is. We were talking today at Football Radar Towers about just how well balanced it is, and that there isn't really a weakness in it. So those players, Lacazette aside, perhaps, are really struggling to justifiably struggling to make it into the team. Even if you look at the players that aren't in there, I've just been looking at this. I just wanted to read the squad that did not make this squad. So Ben Arfa, Lacazette, Martial, Gignac, Coman, Fekir, Diarra, Schneiderlin, Kondogbia, Kabay, Sissoko, Sacco, Jallet, Mathieu, Laporte, Korchar, Mangala, Dean, Raphael Varane, Evra, and Mandanda, which is a squad that didn't make this squad. So it really shows the strength in depth, and there are national teams, England for a start, that would kill for some of those players. So overall it's a healthy thing that we're talking about these players that aren't in the team, because there's so much strength in depth.
The one player that I haven't really seen mentioned that much, either on social media, in the press in France, either, is Steven Nzonzi, and I wanted to get both of your takes on him briefly. I think that, having seen Sevilla a dozen times this season, talk about an incredible player who can cover ground, who can play that role that's often been played by Moussa Sissoko in the recent past, but perhaps offers a little bit more solidity defensively. Is it just too late for this player, given what he's done with Sevilla this season, or is it what's going on here? Just from your both of your opinions. I'll come to you first, Nathan.
I really like Nzonzi as well. Every time I've seen Sevilla this season, he's been excellent, and I've been a fan of him ever since he was in England as well. I thought he was probably a little bit underrated, really, with maybe less than Blackburn, because I thought they knew he was a decent player. But the fact that he went to Stoke and then never really got a move from there, and then got that move to Sevilla, surprised a lot of people. But he's shown exactly why he deserved it. He's excellent, I think, and I agree with you. He's a great box-to-box kind of player. He's really got a great energy. He's a little bit more defensive. He maybe butts heads with Bakayoko in that sort of place. That's maybe why they're maybe leaning towards the Monaco man as being a younger player, although he's not in the squad either. So they both sort of cancelled each other out. Maybe, again, then Rabiot's in the conversation because he's a box-to-box style of player. It's such a deep squad, but there'll always be problems. It looks like, at least from what we've seen tonight in Old Trafford, it looks like Pogba will probably be out. He had to come off with a hamstring injury and pulled up. So that might be 2 or 3 weeks of him. So I doubt he joins up now. So maybe that makes a space for one of those two. But I think the form he's been in, and if he carries on like this, he'll force his way into it anyway. Come hopefully not this time next year, but by the time the summer rolls around and those kind of friendlies, hopefully he's broken into the team by then, because I think he's been spectacular and really does deserve a chance. And there's cases for so many players.
It's true. I think Adam's point was very well taken there with the extra players. So just a final question on the team then. That injury news that Pogba is unlikely to be included with the squad. Who would come in for you then, Adam? You go like for like position-wise, or bring in someone else on merit?
I think it's very difficult to say. I mean, perhaps it would be nice to see Bakayoko, one of the two players you mentioned, Bakayoko or Nzonzi. I know they're different types of players, but I feel like it'd be possibly one of those two that would come in. It depends, again, in terms of who starts ahead of him, or in his absence, I should say, how Deschamps wants to play. Obviously, it's against Luxembourg, I think, and that's not necessarily the most taxing of games. But if they were to play about Pogba in a more meaningful game, it's whether he goes 4-3-3 or whether he goes 4-4-2, and that way he played the Euros, which suited Giroud and helped Griezmann out as well, or whether he switches to a 4-3-3. Because I think the way Kante is playing, it'd be very, very difficult to leave him out. But we talked about Nzonzi. I think Deschamps kind of has his favourites. And I think that's understandable to some extent, because lots of managers make the point that the group is the most important thing, especially at international level, and not necessarily just picking the best 23 players, because that leads to an unbalanced group and squad overall in footballing and sort of social terms, if you like. And I can understand that, but I think I'd love to see Kante being first choice for France for the foreseeable future ahead of Blaise Matuidi, because I think if you look at the comparable form, I think Matuidi's been poor for a long time and Kante's been very good for a long time. So if he goes 4-4-2, I think Kante should come in and he could play alongside a holding player. Perhaps this is where Matuidi would play in Pogba's absence. But Kante's very capable of playing a similar role, and Deschamps has used him as a defensive midfielder before. And I personally prefer him as the person alongside that player, so he can really, use his mobility and really, be that all-action style that we've seen him with Chelsea and Leicester, and alongside Matic, and perhaps alongside a defensive player here, perhaps Bakayoko or Rabiot. So it depends a little bit as to how he wants to play it, but it'd be great to see Bakayoko in the squad at least. I think he deserves his chance, or Nzonzi, one of those two. But I might go Bakayoko, given just for sort of looking forward to the future of him his age. But it's close. It'd be great to see one of them get a cap though.
Put money on him to call up Sissoko now.
Absolutely.
All right. God forbid. No, I shouldn't go that far. Sissoko has been an important player for France, despite his often middling club form. So let's move on now to Ligue 1. We had a decent weekend prediction-wise. We got a lot of predictions right, not exactly scores right. Unfortunately, Nathan and Adam, you did not gain any ground on me. I had 6 points from one correct result, three correct results, one correct score. Nathan had one correct score and one correct result. Adam had 4 correct results. So that leaves me on 70, Nathan on 56, and Adam on 55.
Is there no bonus points for that Bastia red card? I got it right.
You picked the 5-0? I don't know. It's shitty fish in a barrel there. So we are going to start, speaking of Bastia, with their trip to Metz. Adam, I'll come on to you here. After a gutting draw with Saint-Etienne last weekend with Perrin scoring a last-minute equalizer, Metz have a match that is all but ideal to seal their Ligue 1 safety. Does a win here make them safe? And conversely, are Bastia down if they don't get at least a draw? Of course, can still have to play PSG, Lyon, Marseille, and Bordeaux in the season's last 9 matches. Now they haven't won since week 18.
Wow, that's a terrible record, isn't it? It's really quite shocking. I think that given there's 9 games to go now, I think we're getting to the point where these results are going to really start, making those sort of, allowing us to make those sort of big calls, or at least feel like it from both the observers and from the team's point of view, that this is a result that will keep them up, or this is a result that will really put them in really big trouble. But I think both the answers to those questions would be probably not so far. So if Metz win, they'll be on 35 points?
I believe so.
I think, yeah. And if Bastia lose, assuming Nancy don't win, they might do, or Dijon don't. They're still only 3 points off the relegation playoff place / 17th. So I think for Bastia's point of view, if they lose, then there's still a lot to play for. I know they've got, as you mentioned, a terrible run in, and they might end up really paying for that really poor end to Ciccolini's reign in charge. But I still think, given at this stage of the season, we've seen so many leagues that you get really odd results this time of the season. Teams lacking in motivation, perhaps in mid-table, or perhaps if Bordeaux were to drop out of the European race a little bit, that was one example. One of the bigger teams, maybe they can get a result. There's still a lot to play for in those 8 games, and the gap being probably 3 points, maybe not too much more, is still very, capable of being made up, given that Toulouse came 10 games after 10 points adrift and stayed up last season. So there's still still a lot to play for. But from Met's point of view, first of all, the game against Saint Etienne last week, you're right, it was a gutting way to concede those 2 points. Excuse me. But I still think from Met's point of view, there's still so many positives to take from that game, given that they've turned up at the top sides and got torn apart over time and again this season. And I know Saint Etienne have been very average in recent weeks and recent months even, and Loic Perrin basically won that game on his own. But I still think there's a lot of positives taken. They probably should have won the game, and they played really, really well. So going to this game, I think it's a huge opportunity to not put them safe, but to put them within maybe 4 points, 5 points of safety. I don't know. I think 40 points will, as the classic 40 points will keep you up. I think that's definitely the case this season. So they're very much within a shout. But I think for them, this is, I think, with the Abate signing, they've kind of been looking like they're going to step up since you really hit the ground running. And it was a massive signing for them. All right, it didn't do great Osmanlıspor in Turkey, but he's a proven Ligue and goal scorer, and there aren't many of those. So that signing is basically, I think, will keep them in the league, and they'll get enough points at home to get those they'll probably win this weekend, and those 8 points they need to definitely stay in the league in the last 9 games. So Mets are going to be very close if they win to staying up, which would be great for them given the up and down season they've had both on and off the pitch. And Bastia, if they lose, then they've still got a lot to play for. But it's looking tough, and that record, no wins since week 18, is really, really poor. So it would be look difficult for them, but I still think they'd have a fair amount of justifiable hope. So a big game nonetheless, but neither season is done depending on the result just yet.
All right, what will be your score prediction then?
I'm going to say Mets 2-0.
Okay, Nathan?
I'm going for a confident 3-0 Mets victory. I really like Ismaili Sarr as well, the winger at Mets, although Jeremy Smith won't like me saying that because he'll want to keep it as quiet as it's been, but he's been terrific, and he was terrific against Saint Etienne. And
he was.
And Bastia are going down.
All right, I'll go for a 1-1 draw. Shred of optimism for the Corsicans, but point well taken. Sarr was really superb last week.
I don't think I've seen him have a bad game whenever I've watched Mets, and I've only watched them about 3 or 4 times this season, but he's been excellent anytime I've seen him off the bench, starting. Lovely little play.
All right, we'll come now to Saturday's early match. That's Nantes hosting Nice. Nathan, Nantes did really well to battle back last week and earn 3 points. Nice are really injury hit. Paul Bice is now out again for 6 weeks. Even if Ricardo Pereira comes back, that is potentially going to force Malang Sarr back into the limelight. Maybe Lucien Favre goes with Suke at center back. A win here, though, for Nantes puts them just 3 points off Europe, ahead of the matches of the other contending sides. Could they have a say in the race for Europe down the stretch? Something that was really unimaginable when Conceição took over.
Good question. No, I think they've maybe just got a little bit too much, and I think quite a few sides around there have maybe got a little bit too much to do now. I think unless Saint Etienne, they've been in really poor form recently, haven't they? But unless they continue on a massive dive, I can't imagine anyone catching them now. I think that's probably just about sewn up, just because they've got good goal difference. There's a couple of sides around there that are doing still. I can't see Bordeaux or Marseille slipping at all. So they would have to hope that Saint Etienne carry on that results and they keep up their fine form. And I thought they were really good against Montpellier, and to come back and really battle for that. Salah got that winning goal, although a couple of their goals were lucky for their Nakulma. Maybe got a couple of lucky goals that really got them back into the game. And this really is slowly becoming the unravelling of Nice, unfortunately, I think, as well. We hope that they would battle until the end of the season, but Player was a big blow that was followed by an even bigger blow to Willian Cyprian, that's followed by another solid, strong blow to take Paul Bice out of that team. And yes, it's a good chance for Malang Sarr to maybe redeem himself after being really out of the limelight for the last couple of weeks. I'm not as confident of Suke as a centre back really, so I don't really want to see him playing in that role instead of Sarr. I think that's too much of a push. I'd rather see the youngster come back into the side. But this is a really good chance for Nantes, if in all honesty, because Nice will be reeling from that. I don't see too many natural replacements. I mean, I would assume Coziello will probably come in for Cyprian. And Coziello is a fantastic player, but I don't know if you can replace the amount that Cyprian does as well, especially with Remy Walter not being... He's not been as defensive as I expected him to be this season, and that's maybe been covered by the fact that Cyprian covers so much ground. But this is a really good chance for Nantes, and if they do want to get into Europe, which they have a shot at, like I say, I don't think personally they'll make it, but you've got to fight until that lasting blow, and especially if Saint-Etienne keeps slipping up. And, you know, they're away this weekend, and Dijon are fighting for their lives. That's not a guaranteed result for them. If they can creep that, if they get a victory, puts them right in the mix, this is a real chance for them. Whether they've got enough, I'm not so sure long term, but this game's really interesting, I think, at the weekend.
Yeah, just to hat to there, not since Sergio Conceição's appointment, 21 points in 12 matches, sixth in the league over that time. That's certainly European form, I would say. What is your prediction then for this match, Nathan?
I'm going to go with 2-1 for Nantes.
All right. I'm going to go with a scoreless draw. I think that Nantes have looked good, but they also have taken a lot of pleasure against teams that aren't that great defensively, case in point being Montpellier. And I don't know that – I think Nice's defense is a little bit too strong for them. Adam, your prediction? Adam?
Sorry, I muted him. Go ahead, Adam.
1-1 for me.
All right. Now, staying with you, Adam, we're talking about, obviously, Sunday's match between Paris Saint-Germain and Lyon is taking the attention, but there's also, down near the bottom, a very important match between Nancy and Lorient. These two teams are fighting tooth and nail against relegation. Nancy currently occupy the playoff spot on goal difference with Dijon, but a win from Lorient will put them just 3 points from safety. Again, Lorient's goal difference is, to be charitable, pretty terrible as well. The one caveat approaching this match, though, is that Lorient really battled well against PSG. Gave a good account of themselves. I know PSG were coming off a big loss, but Nancy are going to be in a little bit of an emotionally compromised state. Nancy had gone up against Lille and then blown that match to lose 2-1. Does the knowledge that Les Merlus can come back into the conversation surrounding staying in the division necessarily put more pressure on the hosts, Nancy? And how do they cope with that?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's a massive game, really. I think, although Bastia are down there, you could argue these are possibly the two worst sides in the division. I know Bastia have been very poor, but it's very close between the two, and I think at least one of these two will go down. It's a really very, very big game. I think from Nancy's point of view, you're absolutely right. That loss to Lille, they had that massive chance just before Lopez's goal, and Lille went at the end, and Lille went at the other end, and Lopez scored and won them the game. A win or even a point there would be massive for them, given how poor they've been in front of goal in recent weeks. So I think for them, yes, so it's going to be having sort of that point or that comforting result, if you like, or that sort of snatched away from the death would be very, very, it would be a little bit difficult to overcome that this week. I think from Nancy's point of view, as you mentioned before on the pod, they struggle. They just can't score goals, and they have tried so many forward players. They've tried. Hadji hasn't really scored. Darley's been injured recently, but has been very in and out at best. Cora looks completely anonymous when he plays them, and Dan looks past it. They're really, really going to struggle to score goals. So they're relying so much on Issa Dier to who's been by far their best player in attacking areas, to really provide the spark going forward. So I think if they can find goals from somewhere, they've got a chance. I think Alexis Poussin came back from on loan over the winter. I think he's come on and looked good. He had that chance to hit both posts against PSG. I would like to see him start possibly in a forward role, because I think he's looked the most dangerous despite only playing 3 games since coming back from his loan spell in Ligue 2. So they're really going to struggle there. from Lorient's point of view, I know that they're on 22 points, so they're sort of 6 points from safety and the relegation place from Nancy and Dijon. And I still think they're very much in with a shout. They've been unlucky in a lot of games, and they've been close to getting a lot more than perhaps they have done so in previous games, and have lost games at the death and conceded silly goals. And they've obviously been very poor too. And Cassoni's job has been in question in the last couple of weeks, with them looking like they're sort of a vicious cycle. They keep slipping up and they keep losing silly points. But they did battle against PSG, and so did Nancy. They both in the last two games have played well against Paris Saint-Germain. So there is hope for them, but it's just whether they can convert those performances into wins. And I think from both clubs' point of view, it's going to be very, very difficult to say. I think perhaps the two games that Benjamin Makonjo was left out by Cassoni was a poor error. I know Ali Adier impressed, but I'm still thinking Makonjo is the best bet of getting the goals to keep them in the league. Like I said, goal scorers are rare in Ligue, and he's not necessarily a totally proven one, but he has scored goals in spells in this league. So I think that was probably a mistake from his point of view. And they've got some decent players at Lyon. It's just they're so porous at the back. Pi Burns has come in and been average. Zargo Torres been very poor for a number of months now. And Lindsay Rose didn't really work out. Their fullbacks are decent going forward and perhaps not the best positionally. They just keep conceding goals and losing silly games. So I think from the winner of this game, if there is a winner, will perhaps be a little bit more confident going forward. But the loser's going to feel like this was their best chance to get a win between now and the end of the season, and they've lost it. And could, if Nancy lose, it could be doubling on that Lille defeat and really compound what has been a poor few months for them after their resurgence in the mid-season. And if Lorient lose, they'll really think that this is almost the end of the road for them, given they need to win this game for confidence purposes, and perhaps even Cassoni's job. Who knows? So I think it's a huge game, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on Saturday night. It's going to be the winner will feel much better about themselves. The loser, perhaps confidence-wise and emotionally, might be edging towards back to Ligue 2, I'm afraid.
All right, I'm going to go with a 1-2 win for Lorient on the road against Nancy. Adam, your prediction?
I'm going to go 2-2 draw. It doesn't really help either of them, but interesting game.
2 goals from Nancy, a brave prediction. Nathan?
Lorient being porous at the back is going to help them out, I think.
Yes, this is true. This is true.
0-0.
All right, so finally we're going to come on to, obviously, the weekend's Grand Choc. That's PSG hosting Lyon. Nathan, it was an emotionally taxing match, to say the least, for Lyon this week. But they also need to be mindful of the league. And they're doing well in the league, but Europe is not assured yet if they don't, of course, continue to progress in the Europa League. Depay comes in on the opposite flank. How do you approach this match if you're Lyon? Do you bring in Abdel Fekir? Do you bring in Ghazal? Does Lacazette start again?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I think you have to start Lacazette in a game like this because he's their best striker. There's no question about it. And I know they brought him off towards the end of this game in midweek, and with games piling up, it's difficult to throw in players and where to. But I think you have to play him in this one. I think it's an easy decision to bring Memphis in, which is an easy decision because he was excellent at the weekend. And having not played Thursday, tonight, it makes it much easier to slot him into that role because he was really, really the key tormentor against Toulouse and scored a really good goal and a really, really good goal. And yeah, I think you bring Fekir in from the start. I think you're right in mentioning Ghazal because he's really good as an option to keep the ball, and maybe he's a little bit better defensively. But I think you want to test this PSG side after the taxing Barcelona result, which sort of filtered into that Lorient game where they didn't play great really, and Lorient had a couple of chances to probably draw that game. So play on that. I know it's difficult, obviously, coming back up from that excellent result, at least in Rome, to get through to the next round, getting them back up for that, making sure you've got the right squad, because a lot of the ones they would like to start, like Toussaint, like the centre-backs probably as well, like Jallet, might be a little bit leggy. That's more where I'm a little bit worried about of players having to be replaced. Although Rafael's been decent in the last couple of weeks, I prefer Jallet there. Same with the centre back pairing. I thought that Mamana and Diakabe work a little bit better, but I thought Yangambiwa was maybe a little bit lucky on occasion at the weekend, especially in the first half. So that's maybe where more of my worries lie rather than the attacking positions, because I think at the moment they're pretty fortunate in the fact that most players are playing reasonably well, and that Paris Saint-Germain might be a bit nervy in defence as well, especially if it's that same lineup that they've been playing recently. Test them, give them a challenge again, and see if they can react to it. Because yes, you mentioned that Europe's not safe yet, and it's an important game. If they can get a victory out of it or even a point out of it, will be good. But it's a real good chance to have a go at PSG, and I think they should. And they've got enough talent, especially in the attacking areas, to rotate it a little bit.
All right, Adam, coming on to you. Even a rotated Lyon, as Nathan rightly mentions, is going to be dangerous. How much does it? But that being said, Lyon are still a team of some notoriety, of some quality within Ligue. How much does a decisive win here help Unai Emery's status as manager of Paris Saint-Germain?
It's very difficult to know. I have a feeling that Emery's future has already been decided. I obviously don't know that for sure. I just have a feeling that I think a decision perhaps has already been made, whether he wins the treble or whether he wins nothing. I much like Blanc's future was I felt perhaps the decision was already made after they went out to Manchester City. Although they went on to win the treble again last season, it felt like that his departure in the summer was inevitable and almost went sort of not under the radar, but was almost like, oh, okay, that's happened. Perhaps it was seemed to be coming a little bit. And I think the Champions League is such an obsession for Paris Saint-Germain since the QSI takeover. It's all they care about, really. And given the disaster of that Barcelona game, and we talked extensively about that last week on the pod, that I think that's the determining factor. Whether they win well here, if they win 4-0, which is possible given Lyon's midweek game and the possible rotated team. Or whether they go and lose in a narrow game, or whether Lyon beat them comfortably, I still feel like that the league and the domestic competitions are immaterial to some extent for at least for the hierarchy of PSG, not to the fans and not to the players, but the people making decisions at the club care about the Champions League, and that's pretty much it. And it depends how they perceive that Champions League result, whether they say that the first leg was a step in the right direction, but obviously the second leg was terrible, but we still see some progression, or if they say overall we capitulated once again, nothing's really changed. I think that's the determining factor. Obviously, beating Lyon is still a positive and something you can point to, but I'm not sure that it would make a huge amount of difference come the end of the season.
All right, what then would be your prediction for this match, Adam?
2-0 PSG.
Nathan?
2-2.
All right, I'll go for a 3-1 PSG win. That is going to conclude our program for this week. Be sure to join Nathan, Philip, and myself on Monday as we get our own reaction to the final weekend before the international break, and we'll have a little bit more talk about Les Bleus as well. Thanks for listening. This has been Eric Devin for Adam White and Nathan Staples. Please visit us online at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and on Twitter @GFFN.